Hello. So I'm planning to do this particular question, spare faucets company, right? So it's a bit different company, a different question than the other ones. Basically, what we are trying to figure out is basically cost figures for we've been given two jobs, right? So job order 973 and then job order 974. Right, so we need to compare the cost figures which has been calculated by management accountant, and then we need to explain the reasons. Okay, so these is our one requirement, that's our second requirement, and potential consequences, the differences in the job cost estimates produced under two costing systems. Okay, so what could be the reasons and then potential consequences as well. Three potential consequences because of the differences in job cost estimates. That's our A number, first requirement, right? The second requirement tells us about two potential problems that SFS might have experienced in successful implementation of ABC using its recently acquired state-of-art IT systems. So even though if they had all these things, it's just 8 marks, huh? So probably 4 points. 4 points, and basically some of it could be generic, some of it could be basically we can get it inside the this particular case study, right? And then for number B, we need to talk about ABM, a very frequently asked topic. And within this, they want us to focus on operational ABM, strategic ABM. We'll be talking about like what kind of products to produce and all, right? So in terms of operational, it's mostly around basically getting the things done, right? And then the implicit value of an activity, we'll talk about that as well. And then the requirement is basically we need to appraise the above statement and then explain the risks attached to using ABM. That's our 8 marks requirement, right? So that's our 8 marks requirement. We need to appraise the statement and then we need to provide the risks as well. C is basically about how ABM can assist other performance measurement improvement strategies such as total quality management, Six Sigma, and business process reengineering, right? So definitely it will help or assist in some way or the other. So we need to explain that for other performance strategies, right? So that's the requirement. Let's just read through the case study as well a little bit. So Spare Forceps company has a specialist machining facility, so which serves the shipbuilding components market. So it's a specialist machining facility, right? So what does it do? It serves the shipping components market. So they basically sell out all this shipbuilding components and all, right? So that's what they basically do. It's always a good thing to just to understand the business itself, so that you can relate to it somehow, or like try thinking of a local company which does the similar thing so that you have a little bit of idea about it, right? So that's what basically everyone says. So that's what I like to do as well when I get stuck. Another thing is let's look at this current job costing system. So what do they have currently? So okay, so current jobs system has two categories of direct cost. Okay, there is two direct cost. What is it? Direct materials, direct manufacturing. Okay, and then the single indirect cost pool. A single indirect cost pool. So it's not divided into activities, it's a single indirect. Machine overhead, which is allocated on the basis of direct labor hours. Okay, on the basis of direct labor hours. So manufacturing overhead, which is allocated based on direct labor hours, right? So basically traditional costing, right? The indirect cost allocation rate of the existing job costing system is 120 per direct manufacturing labor hour. So it's basically they are assigning a overhead of 120 per hour per labor hour, right? Okay, 120. And then proposed activity based approach to job costing, right? So what are we proposing is that, remember what was the requirement over here, cost figures per unit for job order, both of them prepared by management accountant, and then what are the potential consequences and reasons, and then the difference in job cost estimates produced under two costing systems, right? So we need to compare both of them. Okay, so we need to basically compare both of them. So proposed activity based approach to job costing, right? So recently some visibility consultancy partnership proposed the use of activity based approach, right? So they are using activity based costing now. So to redefine the job costing system of SFS, VCP has a recommendation to retain two direct cost categories. However, VCP further recommended the replacement of a single indirect cost pool with 5 indirect cost pools. Okay, so they divided into activities. So each of the 5 areas represents an activity area, right? The premises of SFS. So each activity has its own supervisor who is responsible for his or her operating budget, right? And these are the activity areas. So they do some material handling, lathe work, milling, grinding, inspection, and everything, right? So of course inspection will be at the very end normally, right? And then the cost driver has a allocated per base, right? So cost driver is basically, what is it? Number of components. So in terms of materials, it's number of components. In terms of lathe work, it's number of cuts. In terms of milling, it's number of machine hours, right? So in terms of grinding, it's number of components. And then inspection is number of units inspected. And then allocation rates are given as well. So SFS has already invested in state-of-art IT systems which have capability of automatically collate all the data necessary for budgeting in the 5 areas. Okay. And then illustrative cost per unit calculations. The management accountant calculated the manufacturing cost per unit of 2 representative jobs under the 2 costing system as follows. Okay, they have identified, they have compared it as well, right? So current costing system is basically showing how much for job order 973, 1172, and for activity based costing system it's showing a costing for job is 1612, and then for job order 974 it's 588.89, right? So those are the 2 details that we have. Let's just compare with our answer as well. Right, so for that let's read through the key answer tips as well. First of all, so the fair tough question that looks at ABC and ABM. So fairly tough question, right? It looks at ABC and ABM, and ensure that you've learned the key concepts of both and appreciate the difference. In particular, make sure you're comfortable considering how different models and methodologies work together. They're talking about referring to the part C requirement, I guess, in that. Number AI. So the differences in reported cost estimates calculated under each of the costing systems are significant. Remember what's the difference over here? Here's 0, and then probably 11 minus thing will be what, 4, and then 440, something like that, right? So it's very significant, right? And basically in this thing as well it's very significant, almost 12. So as you can see over here as well, the management accountant calculation, so that's especially the case with 973, right? So it's like how much, 937.54% increase in the reported cost. And in terms of job order 974, it's 5.02, right? How do they calculate it? It's basically simple, this figure minus this figure, and then based on this figure, right? So under existing system versus the newer system. So similarly, why does that happen, right? So we need to start explaining about that as well. So remember in the question they mentioned explain the reasons and potential consequences, right? Potential consequences. The common occurrence when activity costing is implemented is that low volumes show an increase in their reported cost, while high volume shows decrease in reported cost, right? So this is the very much case with regard to subject of orders 973 and 974, right? And the reported cost also differ due to the following. Job order 973, 974 differ in the way they consume activities in each of the 5 activity areas within SFS premise, right? So it's always with activity cost based costing. They are basically allocating it based on how many activities you utilize, right? That's one thing. And then the activity differ in indirect cost allocation basis. The in particular, no activity area uses direct labor as a basis of allocating indirect cost, right? So since we are not using, what this point is trying to say, since we are not using direct machine hour, right? So we are allocating based on activity. So it does not mean that some activity which uses more machinery will use similar amount of activity, okay, later on. That's what the point basically means. So no activity uses direct labor hours, right? And then it can't be always correlated basically. So the two areas where the differences in reported product cost might be important to SFS is as follows, right? Product design. Since it is more probable that those involved in the design of the product will find the results produced by the ABC approach to be more credible, this is especially the case in machine-oriented environment where direct labors are unlikely to be major cost driver. Right. So normally that's what happens, right? So nowadays it's indirect costs are higher where direct labors are unlikely to be major cost driver. Very important point. And ABC can be more of assistance to product designers and may single areas where cost reductions can be achieved. For example, using fewer cuts of lathe and reducing the number of machine hours required in milling area. So they could start to work on that, right? So it's basically it will provide a bit of more assistance to product designers and may signal where cost reductions can be achieved, right? So what are they proposing over here? It's basically the cuts on the lathe, right? So they can start reducing that, or they can basically reduce the number of machine hours required. So in the milling area, right? So you see it's the driver per rate is basically 24. That's a huge cost, right? That's a very huge cost. And then for product pricing, all right, so what could be the consequences will be basically those things, right? We provided them with the reason over here. What was the reason? Basically, if they consume more activities, then it will be more, right? basically if both the job orders could be consuming different activities, that's why they have a higher cost in that. And then another thing is, in terms of indirect cost allocation, what has happened, it's not always directly correlated with the direct labor's hours, right? So on the basis of allocating indirect cost, what will be the consequence of that? It's basically going to show us, or whatever ABC will basically provide us with, consequences will be for improvement on that, right? So it will provide improvement on product design, which could cater to like reducing all this cost regarding milling or load work or inspection itself as well, right? So it might not be directly correlated, but if we do have better designs, then the faulty rate could be reduced to some extent, and then to some extent inspection can be reduced as well. So it provides a room for improvement. For a product pricing, it provides us that, uh, it provides us, and then it shows us that job order 973, as you can see over here, the costs are being understated. Okay, the costs are being understated in this case. The costs are being understated. And then in case of job order 974, what is happening? It's being overstated, right? So they should be what? They should be the management of SFS. What should they should be? They should be aware of failing to recover the cost incurred on job 973 because they are underestimating it. So they are pricing it lower, right? So similarly, so this could have been affecting their business performance compared to its competitors based on pricing. Basically, the other could have. Our pricing could have been lower because we are underestimating it, and then we are charging lower price while the competitor is charging a higher price. We might have a bigger market share, but that's coming at a loss. Okay, that's coming at a loss. Another thing is, we need to explain in number 2 sub requirement of number A, right? Explain 2 problems that SFS might have experienced in successful implementation of an ABC using recently acquired state-of-art systems, right? So what could be the 2 potential problems that SFS could have experienced when successful implementation of ABC? So what could have happened is basically large amount of data, time consuming, right? So basically, and then lack of understanding of value drivers. That's always the problem with ABC. It's hard to identify, okay, sometimes. So what does it say in the answer? So it says that initially it would be time consuming to collect a large amount of data, okay, and then activities relating to each job taken by SFS. Hence, the cost of buying, implementing, and maintaining system of activity-based costing is likely to be significant because you have to collect large amount of data, right? And then it's time consuming as well. So all these systems should be in place, so that will be taking up a lot of cost, basically. And then another thing is basically cost drivers, right? So it's always hard to, or it's vital to identify, otherwise the results given by ABC could be inaccurate, leading to incorrect decisions, right? Those are the 2 things that happens. For 4 marks, 2 points to 2 points. Okay, so basically 1 point for time consuming large thing, and then after that you could say like what kind of implementation challenges you could face is basically while implementing maintaining of ABC, costing is likely to be significant. For the second thing, identifying cost drivers is very important, and then after, if it's not identified incorrectly, what will happen? It will lead to incorrect decisions. Okay, so there is 2 points within that itself, number 2 point. So that's why they are giving 2 points over there, 1 for 2. So it's always good strategy to divide the marks. So application of ABM requires the management of SFS focus on each of the following. Appraise the following above statement and explain the risks attaching to one of the ABM, right? So basically we can say that 1, 2, 3 marks for that. So 2 marks for operational, 2 marks for strategy, 2 marks for implicit value, and then 2 marks for risks. So what is ABM, right? Operational ABM is doing things right. Doing things right. Those activities which add value to a product. Add value to a product can be identified and improved. Activities that do not add value should be reduced in order to cut costs without reducing product value. For example, a product or service may have been estimated to require a longer activity time than product or service that require. Every effort should be made to find ways of reducing number of hours required. Okay, so what does this mean? So for example, what has happened is product and service which is estimated to have longer activity time, what should be done? We should reduce those, right? And we should try to another thing is where, so we should try to encourage or have that kind of activities or services which require less of our activity time. Okay, so that's what we should be focusing on in terms of operational ABM. For strategic ABM, it's about doing the right things. It's about doing the right things. Doing things right is basically with operational, doing the right things, right? So using ABC information, what do? We basically, I told you about before, right, as well, right? So what product to develop, what activities to use, right? Which activities to use, profitability analysis, which is like for product or profit or customer, right? So those are the decisions which are made at strategic level. So it's about doing the right things. Operational is more about doing things right, and it's about what? It's about the labor hours and all, whatever you are crunching, whichever activity is taking a lot of time, we try to reduce those those hours. Okay, so or otherwise we could say like the lathe work, which is there could be a maximum number of cuts, right? So we might want to reduce those cuts, right? So basically a bit of optimizing thing, that's what we are doing, right? So that's one thing. And then strategic ABM, it's about doing the right things, where to launch a product or what kind of product to develop, right? Understanding what kind of cost structures are there within activities and which activities should you use. And then focusing on profitability part as well, because you have your costing, then you try to analyze what's the cost for a particular customer or for a product, right? So for customer, you will do customer profitability analysis, you will do product profitability analysis. So those are the strategic level activity, right? And then implicit value of an activity. So an activity may have implicit value, not necessarily reflected in financial value, right? Financial value added to any services or product. So SFS might decide to cut back on the level of expenditure involved in servicing customers. So implicit value in this thing means that it's not very apparent. Okay, it's not very apparent, like let's say the customer level as well, right? So which may not be reflected by the financial value, right? And then if we decide to cut on it or servicing customers, this might lead to poorer value by customers for the services provided by SFS, with a consequent fall in the demand. Okay, so that could lead to that, right? So even though it's not very apparent, or the activity may have implicit value which is not yet reflected in the financial value. Okay, and then what are the risks attaching to the use of ABM? So ABMs in so far can give wrong signals as well, right? For example, a particular pleasant work environment can attract and retain best employee, but may not be identified as a adding value in operational ABM. Okay, so by the same token, a customer that represents a loss based on committed activities, but that opens or leads to a new market, may be identified as a low value customer by strategic ABM. Okay, so just these are always risks that happens, right? So with operational, what happens is basically you think that like the some of the activities or pleasant work environment is not adding value, right? So you want to start pushing a bit further. Then what happens is you want retain the best staff, and it's there is always a risk associated with losing those best people, right? So that will lead to that's always a risk with ABM. For strategic ones, so you might see that there is a customer which is not fully committed, right, based on activities, and it's representing a loss for the business. So for when you're doing a consumer profitability analysis, then you try to remove it, but what happens is that customer itself um, could be a person who is actually promoting the brand or is spreading the word of mouth. Okay, so it could always lead to other sales from that person. Okay, so that could always be the risks. And then we need to discuss about how ABM can assist other performance improvement strategies, right? How it can assist. So we can basically let's discuss about TQM and everything, okay, whatever they have suggested. So it's for 5 marks, okay, 5 points that we need to come out with. So ABM can be used alongside different performance measurement strategies, right? And basically in case of TQM, what can we do? TQM is basically more about reducing the quality cost associated, right? So what kind of quality costs are there? Conformance, not conformance. What are conformance costs? So conformance costs are basically there is two types of it. Okay, so there is prevention cost, then there is appraisal cost. So whatever goods are produced, it's produced to the specification. What about the other thing? Appraisal cost is basically whatever is produced, it should be according to the standards, right? And then the other cost is non-conformance cost, is non-compliance cost, right? So it's basically whether it's internal failure or external failure, right? So those are the costs. So costs which can be analyzed into cost of conformance and cost of non-conformance. The aim of TQM is to reduce the cost of non-conformance, right? So it's always to get the things right in the beginning itself, right? And whatever is produced, it's according to the standards. So what does ABM do? ABM encourages organizations to more accurately calculate this quality related cost by identifying appropriate cost drivers and then monitoring improvements, right? So we can basically accurately calculate the quality cost based on the cost drivers, okay, and then monitoring those improvements. Let's say some activity is causing a bit of defect in the product that we are producing, right? So when we are making a particular kind of cut or something, the product is being bent, okay, so we try to identify those cost drivers and then basically improve it. Six Sigma and business process reengineering is basically, it involves to achieve large one-off improvements, right? So Six Sigma is more about like radical changes, right? So radical changes which relates to efficiency and better customer satisfaction, right? How can ABM support these activities? It can do it in many ways. Identify the activities that need improvement and establishing priorities, right? So what are the processes that needs to be improved, right? So it helps to answer these questions, which is basically about priority, and then we provide a cost justification for proceeding with the project. Basically, that is cost benefit analysis, and then we monitor the benefits of it. Okay, so that's the thing. As you can see, 1 marks per point. And then for number B, it was 2 comments on merits. Right, for operational ABM it was 2 marks, strategic 2, implicit value of an activity 2 marks. Right, so if you have this thing marking scheme under your thing, it will be very easy. So unit cost per unit comparison, reasons, and then potential consequences. As you can see, how the marks are broken down, and it follows the same structure. Okay, it follows the same structure. So if you see across any marking guide, you'll see that the people who follow structure or marking structure based on your own assumptions, or like you start to, so you see if you're looking at this thing, you break down the requirement. Okay, so first is comparison, second is reasons, third is potential consequences. Right, so it's hard to break it down, but if you see, the marks are divided in that order itself only. As you can see in the marking guide as well, it will only be available later on, but you can do it. Okay, and then what's the potential consequences? It's 4 marks, you see. Right, so that's what the structure they have followed over here as well. So they did the comparison in the first section, and then they provided the reasons why it could happen. Then they talked about what the implications part. Okay, so like it's not that many reasons that this happened. Is basically we always need to think about, like, if you know about ABC, you will know about the reasons. Okay, it's very easy to figure out the reasons. Right, so that's how this question can be answered. Thank you for being over here. Take care. Bye bye.